Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Exelby. Welcome to today's virtual symposium presentation about placemaking and communities in bloom. Before we begin the webinar today, I'd like to thank you for coming to the webinar, and I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and partners for their contributions to the 2020 special edition of Communities in Bloom. Their support and the support of our registered communities is truly appreciated. Today's webinar is sponsored by our longtime sponsor, the National Capital Commission. Thank you so much to the NCC for their support of the program. And we actually have a short video to share with you today on their behalf.
Every day, we work to build an inspiring capital that is a source of pride for all Canadians.
Okay, thank you for that video. Now, before I introduce today's speakers, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A feature throughout the presentations. We'll do our best to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. I'll be keeping track of any comments that are and questions that are typed throughout the presentation. If you don't see the Q&A feature on your screen at the moment, just hover your mouse over the lower area of the screen and it should pop back up again. Now, we've actually got two separate presentations for you today, and we'll start with introducing the speakers for the first presentation. Our first two speakers are Megan Jones and Gwen Johnner. Gwen Johnner is a retired educator living in Indian Head, Saskatchewan. She is very involved with her community and has served as a volunteer with her local Communities in Bloom organization for 16 years. She's also been a provincial judge for us and is a past National Communities in Bloom board member. She's in her 8th year as a councillor with the town of Indian Head and serves as a liaison between the local CIB committee and council. Megan Jones is a community and parks planner with more than 18 years of experience. Her first 7 years of planning were focused on parks and open spaces, recreation and cultural planning throughout Alberta, as well as Saskatchewan. And after pursuing a master's degree in urban and regional planning, Megan has been able to expand her skills to the larger regional planning and land use planning scope. This has provided her with the ability to work with team members on all scales of higher level planning, as well as the details of implementation. So please join me in welcoming Megan and Gwen today for our first presentation about placemaking and communities in bloom.
Thank you, Andrew. Just going to start this. So welcome. Gwen Johnner and I are going to be doing the first presentation, Placemaking and Communities in Bloom. We're going to provide a little bit more of the background information on what placemaking is and more some examples from our experiences. I'm going to get Gwen to introduce herself first.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here today. I'm quite lucky to be retired, and that's provided me the time to be very involved with Communities in Bloom. I've been a volunteer. I've been chairperson of our local Communities in Bloom committee, as well as Andrew said, provincial judge and national director. This has been great because it's given me the opportunity to meet incredible people, visit vibrant communities, and learn best practices from so many different kinds of communities around. And I've also, as Andrew said, been involved with my community, but mostly, especially these days, I love being a spoiled grandma.
And I'm Megan Jones. I have my undergraduate degree in Parks, Recreation, and Sport Planning from the University of Alberta. I did my master's in Urban and Regional Planning at Queen's University, and I've been a consultant for 15 years. And the other 3 years I spent at the City of Regina and working for the coalitions linking action and science for prevention, a Healthy Canada by Design CLASP initiative through the health region in Regina. And my current role for the last 2 months has been the Director of Stewardship and Operations for the Provincial Capital Commission in Regina. But I also teach as a sessional lecturer at the University of Regina in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Health Studies. And the focus is on the sociology of sport, recreation, and leisure. And then I've been a fitness leader for the last many years, since 1996. I'm going to get Gwen to give a bit of an overview first of the Communities in Bloom.
Okay, so Communities in Bloom, whether it's provincial, national, or international, are evaluated with the same kind of grid. There are 6 categories with an emphasis on 4 different sectors: municipal, all municipal properties, parks, green spaces, streets, streetscapes, etc. It can also include museums and historical sites. It includes businesses and institutions, obviously commercial sectors, but also can include schools, universities, churches, hospitals, organizational kinds of buildings. Also, it can include tourism and chamber of commerce. In rural communities, it can also include farming. The other sector is the residential, obviously properties owned by citizens or citizen groups. Within those criteria, there are 6 criteria that are evaluated by judges. I think, Megan, you could probably move on to the next one. The criteria are tidiness, environmental awareness, natural and cultural heritage conservation, tree and urban forest management, landscaped areas, and floral displays. So each of those criteria has many, many descriptors. And remember the 4 sectors that they are also being evaluated on. So just quickly, we'll go through these. And just as the slide is saying, that tidiness includes overall tidiness effort by municipality, businesses, institutions, and residents. Environmental action will be policy and bylaws, programs, and best practices pertaining to green spaces. Heritage conservation includes both efforts to preserve natural and cultural heritage. Urban forestry, all standards for tree management. Landscape includes planning, design, construction, and maintenance of parks and green spaces. And floral displays evaluates all community sectors in design, planning, and maintenance of floral display.
Thank you, Gwen, for that overview of the Communities in Bloom. We pulled this quote from Jane Jacobs because really Communities in Bloom includes everybody. And that's why community involvement is so important, because communities have the capability of providing something for everybody, and only because and only when they are created by everybody. And that's really the essence of Communities in Bloom. So we wanted to pull that quote in for this. A lot of the resources came from the Project for Public Spaces. There's Placemaking, Making It Happen training. I took that training in New York City in 2011. It was incredible. And then there's Placemaking. What if we build our cities around places, and what makes a place great? All of these resources can be found using the Google search engine. They're very easy, but if you have any questions, Gwen and I have our contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out to me and I can provide you the direct link to any of these resources. So today's discussion, our places include parks, plazas, open space, sidewalks, back alleys, streets, any place where you can run into your neighbor or a stranger and engage in conversation. We're really focusing on those outdoor spaces in which you can run into your neighbor or stranger. Placemaking is really a strong sense of place. The sense of place can influence the physical, the social, the emotional, the ecological health of the community. This is a picture from the city of downtown Detroit, but really it could be done anywhere. You can scale it back, you can make it bigger, you can adapt it to fit within the community. There are 11 principles for creating great community spaces. Really, the community is the expert. Make sure that that is a key piece of the information. The community needs to have some input in order to have ownership and to take some responsibility for the space. And they will if they are part of the creation process. Create a place, not a design. There's constant conversations that I have on creating a place. It may look beautiful from an aerial view, but if it's not usable and doesn't have that sense of place, then it's not going to be as utilized as a place that is a placemaking. Look for partners, a variety of partners that can be a part of the conversation. You will always hear it can't be done. I've heard that so many times of no, or we've tried it before, it didn't work. But maybe examining why it didn't work before and coming up with some solutions for that. And maybe you might come to the conclusion that it can't be done, or it may have to be done in a different way. Make sure you have a vision. A vision is crucial to everybody understanding the overall sense of place that you're trying to create. That vision also is communicated to the community, but it's communicated to the partners. And the partners are crucial to being able to understand, which your partners can be the community. And you can see a lot by observing. Sitting out, observing spaces that maybe have a great sense of place and you feel like you're walking into something special. Observe those places, see what's being done. Don't try to replicate it, but you can make it your own within your own community. Form supports function. So what form does a space need in order to support the function? So really thinking about the function first and then thinking about the form after. Triangulate. So this is about an external stimulus that really provides a linkage between the people, and it prompts strangers to talk to other strangers as if they know each other. So it's that one common piece that strangers can start talking about. Experiment, lighter, quicker, cheaper, tactical urbanism. We'll discuss that a little bit further into the presentation, but things don't have to be expensive in order to create a place. So then it leads to the next one. Money is not always the issue. It can be one of the issues, but again, if you do lighter, quicker, cheaper, it doesn't have to be the only issue. And you're never finished. The space, the place should always be evolving as the community evolves. So again, I really wanted to highlight that placemaking needs to be rooted in public participation. The community and people need to define and plan for the needs and wants. That is with relation to infrastructure, resources. So even though you may think you know what the community wants, getting meaningful input is crucial to the success of places. That spectrum along the bottom is the IAP2, so the International Association of Public Participation spectrum. You can have people involved from inform to empower. Typically, what I like to execute is more along the involve and collaborate. And different stakeholders and different residents, public will have a different piece and role within the spectrum. We're going to go over really quickly what makes a great place. This is from the Project for Public Spaces. This is access and linkages, comfort and image, uses and activities, and sociability. This is the wheel that kind of highlights what everything is. There's the key attributes, the intangibles, and then how you can measure. We're going to discuss access and linkages first. So some of the information with respect to access and linkages is note its connection to the surroundings. So context is important. So include the visual links, take a look around. What is the place and what are its connections to its surroundings? Does it have any? It's easy to get to, it's easy to enter, and it's easy to navigate once you're within. You can see what's going on there, both from a distance, so from further away, and then as you get up closer, you can start to see the intimate details. It's conveniently reached by foot, public transit, and it has a high parking turnover. There's a lot of people that go and utilize these spaces. So questions to consider when you're looking at, is it accessible? Is it linked to the community? Can you see the space from a distance? Is its interior visible from the outside? That doesn't mean the whole space is visible, but you can catch glimpses and you know what's going on in the space. Do occupants in the adjacent buildings use the space? Are there people coming outside? Are they spilling out onto the sidewalk and in using the space? And do sidewalks lead to and from adjacent areas and adjacent places?
Okay, so I know that there are many places that you can think of that possibly already address these within your own communities. I've just picked a few that I've been lucky enough to observe or to find in my travels with CIB. So a good example, I think, to begin is the CN Trackside Garden in Kamsack. Located at the end of Kamsack's main street, it celebrates the history and importance of the railway and the growth of their community. Originally, the CN maintained a formal English garden here that had an employed and dedicated employee to look after the gardens. They were greatly admired then and refurbished and redone at this point for people now. There are benches that are there for people to gather or enjoy the beauty of the garden. Communities in Bloom is a natural fit when it comes to integrating all the placemaking ideals. This particular garden addresses the history, urban landscape, floral displays, and of course, as many projects will always have, great community involvement. I think the next one, yeah. The next one is from a community, also Saskatchewan in Melfort, called Parkview Place. Parkside Place is located between two residential areas. It was created at the junction of Main Street and a new development that was happening just north of that particular end of the street. It's visible on three sides, provides beauty and function for those living close by, as well as for all the motorists and those who like to stop by on a walk or on a bike ride. It's featured in Melfort's roadside attractions, and I think it's a nice example of how to merge two places between the old and the new.
Thank you, Gwen. We're going to discuss comfort and image. So some of the information with comfort and image, it's comfortable and it looks inviting. Women really are good judges of comfort and image because they tend to use the spaces and they're a little bit more discriminating about the public spaces they use. It's the safety, the cleanliness, and the availability of places to sit. As much as I laughed at this gentleman on Parks and Recreation that says there's a disturbing lack of benches in Ramsett Park, I want to sit more. Benches are important places to sit, to spectate, to people watch, to visit. And it can be more than just benches. They can be movable pieces of furniture. We'll talk about that a little bit more into the presentation, but there are some key strategies for the placement of seating with the Project for Public Spaces, and I have included the link within this slide. I wanted to provide just a little bit of a couple of high-level pieces of information with respect to seating. So you should really have a location within the action. You should be able to view the action, but you should be out of the flow of pedestrian traffic. So as you can see, these benches are not facing the right direction for what people actually want to use them for. Some of the other key pieces of information that the Project for Public Spaces provides is that a lot of the younger generations like to sit on the back of benches. So including wood benches, structures that have thicker pieces of wood along the back are additionally helpful. And really placing the seating in relation to some of the other important amenities such as waste receptacles and the washrooms and access and linkages. The other piece that we wanted to provide is more movable furniture. This allows people to go where they want, to sit where they want, with whom they want, and in groups and sizes. They can face whatever direction they feel comfortable. Something to keep in mind that I don't think we've had a lot of discussions on, metal doesn't really work well in Saskatchewan. It's cold in the winter and it is hot in the summer. If you've ever tried to sit on one in the middle of summer, it is hot, especially if you're wearing a skirt. But in the middle of winter, it is incredibly cold. So there are different pieces of information and different materials that you can use. But it looks good and it feels good. There's ledges, steps, benches, movable chairs, including the ability to be able to move into the shade or the sun. You can be in groups, alone, or you can be close to or removed from the activity. So those are some options with some movable furniture. One of the other key pieces is keeping up appearances and maintenance. So quick graffiti removal. I don't know how comfortable this looks to you, but I wouldn't really feel like, oh, this is a great place to sit. So just making sure that we keep up with our graffiti removal. So some questions to consider when we're talking about comfort and image of spaces. Does the place make a good first impression? Are there as many women as there are men? Are there enough places to sit and different types of places to sit? Are spaces clean and free of litter? And are there photo opportunities available? That is becoming more and more crucial to the success of public spaces because we have a lot more selfies, as you've probably witnessed on social media. There's a lot more opportunities for photos and we don't have to always have a camera and film anymore.
Okay, so to illustrate this, a great space I think is one that's been created in the heart of East End, Saskatchewan. There's balance and beauty, and in this picture you can see ample seating, whether to sit in the sun or under the shade of the canopy. There are 2 trash receptacles to encourage tidiness. The raised bed planters provide symmetry and define the space, and the location is ideal as it shares a space with multi-tenant buildings, a school, and the main highway. The second one that I chose is 2 spaces in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. I chose them to illustrate how branding can be used successfully within the parameters of placemaking and CIB. These 2 tidy spaces in Maple Creek show the character and the history that this community has embraced. The benches are custom made with wagon wheels and they tie both of the spaces together. And it's comforting. It's kind of like an old friend when you're walking around the town because you see the familiarity and it just draws you into their history. The placement of flowers and rustic barrels and wooden structures that they built to house the trash receptacles kind of keep this theme going.
Thank you, Gwen. We're going to discuss next uses and activities. So there's a range of activities. The power of 10 plus. That is the theory that you need 10 or more things for somebody to do when they come to a space. So that can not only be included within the space, but the surroundings, which is also what makes access and linkages important. So places really thrive when there's a range of reasons to be there and for them to return. So I've provided a link there as well about the power of 10 plus. Carefully chosen and appropriate activities that attract people at various times throughout the day. So for example, downtowns have typically started to try to have a range of activities after the hours of 5 o'clock to really activate their spaces throughout the evenings and into the night. Ideally, these activities reflect the culture and the history of the surrounding community so that there can be a little bit more ownership and a little bit more involvement. This is a picture that I've taken from the Regina Downtown. It's Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. This is a cinema under the stars. This obviously not from this past summer, but they pack the park. Victoria Park is the plaza space that is and park that is downtown Regina. It is packed on a Wednesday night, and it was. So some of the questions to ask about uses and activities. Are people using the space, or is it empty? Is it used by people of all ages, genders, and cultures? So there's a variety of people. How many activities are happening at one time? So we may just have the cinema under the stars, but there's a lot going on in the background on the plaza. This is the park space that is closest to us in the picture. There are a lot of things that are going on. There's activities, there's games for the families, because once they come down there, there needs to be more than just one thing to go do. What part of the spaces are used, which ones are not? And can you identify if anyone is in charge or taking care of the space? So is there somebody that you can go to and you can ask, hey, I need a washroom. Where do I access the washrooms? That also helps with the uses and activities.
Many spaces are used for activities in various and specific usages. A few examples pictured here from Melfort, the Labyrinth, and in Indian Head, the Sunbeam Creek Walking Trail. Many communities have created community gardens, which prove to be all-encompassing, I think. They provide organic produce, but also serve to educate and encourage multi-generational participation. And best of all, it's great fun on this short kind of summers that we have. Historical walking tours, like the one pictured here from Indian Head, highlight a community's architectural and urban heritage.
Our final project for public spaces placemaking initiative is sociability. So the most important quality for a place to achieve, but it's also the most difficult. It's the place where people meet friends, they greet neighbors, and interact with strangers. This was the picture on your far right is actually parking day that we set up some games. We took over parking spaces in downtown Regina a couple years ago. This is when I was working with Stantec, and these are a couple of my colleagues. We really activated the spaces and it was a lot of fun. One of the additional pieces, you can see my dogs to the left. I have two giant Newfoundlands and they are definitely a conversation starter. I know many of the names of the dogs in my neighborhood, but I probably could not tell you the names of the people, but I do know how they are. And we often have just casual conversations within the park and on the sidewalks. So really creating those temporary spaces for socialization to occur, but you can also have just in the public realm on the sidewalks. This is an example from Edmonton. This is in Jasper Avenue. They took over the parking space and put out a table tennis table for the entire summer. So not only were people getting outside, they were being a little bit more active, they were enjoying the weather, but they were also enjoying one another and being social. One of the presentations that we had done a few years ago is Tactical Streets / Tactical Urbanism. There's temporary installations in the public realm. They're intended to provide temporary spaces to socialize, but also traffic calming measures, which is one of the examples, the example that I included in the picture. So these can be put up and taken down on a seasonal basis. They can be used with planters. You can use a large number of the lighter, quicker, cheaper items that are also available through Project for Public Spaces. We did a tactical urbanism workshop with the Regina Downtown Business Improvement and the Warehouse Business Improvement Districts in 2018. And I provided the link here to some of the pictures because Kenton just provided some amazing photos. And you can see some of the great initiatives that took place. We had about 50 people in this workshop, and it was just incredible the ideas that they came up with pallets. So sociability, asking some of the questions, is this a place where you would choose to meet your friends? Are people in groups? Do people seem to know each other? Do they want to get to know each other? Are people smiling? Does the mix of the people using the space reflect the larger community? So do you have a variety of different spaces or congregational spaces for everybody to get together? And do people keep the place clean?
Right. So we found too that just gathering to work together is a great sociability thing. And so when you have a big project or a project that you're working in your community, not only do the friendships and the plants grow, but so does the pride. Every community relies on the involvement of all the sectors of their community to work together. And the quality of life within our communities is so interwoven. So whether you're in these pictures gathering to build composters or getting together to help out with spring cleaning, the sociability aspect in all projects is really all about CIB.
And we didn't want to forget, because you saw a lot of the pictures had a lot of people very close together, but we wanted to make sure we highlighted some of the COVID-19 impacts on placemaking. Pandemics of the past have really shaped our cities and our public realm, so this one won't be any different. There are a variety of methods that are starting to take place, but I'm sure over the next few years, planners, designers, engineers, architects, landscape architects are all going to come together and come up with some great ideas on how we can stay safe and still continue to use our public spaces. So some of the things that have just been discussed recently, one of them is movable furniture. So it can be moved according to changing restrictions. Cleaning can be more thorough because it can be done off-site if needed. You can also cycle different pieces of furniture through. There's the positive impacts of being outdoors, so you can still engage in those and you can take part in some of the activities outside and some of the socialization, but you can still maintain that 6-foot distance because benches are not always placed within that 2 meter or 6 feet distance. There are designated and marked spaces. In some cases, there are one-ways only, but this really provides a little bit more of an understanding of where you should be for those that don't have an understanding of what 2 meters or what 6 feet actually looks like. So marking out those spaces on trails and sidewalks, but also within the open space as well on my opening slide that had the bubbles marked out in park spaces. Sidewalk and pathway widths, that's something that we've really started to discuss a lot in my current role. It doesn't have to be paved the entire width. It doesn't have to be concrete or asphalt. You can have crusher dust, gravel, different things along the sides that you can widen the pathways so that you can allow for that 2 meters and 6 feet distancing. But it also helps with winter maintenance, because often we have a lot of different grit and grime that is pushed off the trails when we're cleaning them onto the sides. Greater maintenance and operation of the spaces. So I don't know if any of you have seen a lot of these images, but of the immense amounts of garbage that we're piling up in a lot of our open spaces. But in addition to that, there was also the cleaning of playground structures, benches, public washrooms, picnic sites, etc. And then common public spaces, so the sidewalks, the streets, the plazas. There's been an impact on that in terms of marking out spaces and having to identify, again, where people should be and what's safe. So really what we wanted to provide an overview is the underlying principle that connects communities in bloom and placemaking is about creating great places to live. It's about community. It's about developing these spaces as a community and really being able to share them now within a safe and effective environment.
And I'd just like to add, Megan, you know, you've talked about the definition and ideals of placemaking, and I feel that Communities in Bloom speaks to the more grassroots application of those kinds of ideals. Communities realize the importance of creating spaces that are welcoming, inclusive, and fun, and the end result is a community that enjoys an enriched quality of life. And in the end, that's what we want. We want communities that are wonderful places to live. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. This is our contact information if you want to get in touch with us.
All right, thank you so much, Gwen and Megan, for your presentations.
Thanks, Andrew.
It's as the Saskatchewan Communities in Bloom coordinator, it's great to see a couple people that I know, of course, work with both of you on a regular basis, speaking at the National Symposium. That being said, I've also gotten to learn quite a bit about Coquitlam over the last number of years through attending the National Parks and Grounds Symposium, and that's where our next two speakers come from. So coming up, we have Kathleen Reinheimer and Wendy Wiedrich. Kathleen started her career as a gardener and has been in her role as Coquitlam's park manager for the last 16 years. She's an advocate for transformative power of community engagement in parks, and she sits on the board of BC Communities in Bloom. So thank you for volunteering at that provincial level as well. The Communities in Bloom program in Coquitlam is fully supported by their civic government, local businesses, and community organizations, as well as institutions, residents, and visitors. Wendy is the Parks Operation Manager for the City of Coquitlam. Wendy, her portfolio includes the city's Park Spark team, who works with the community to bring Coquitlam's parks alive. And I'm glad I don't have to say that team name 10 times fast anyway. So Wendy has worked in the municipal parks and recreation field for over 35 years. Her philosophy is to focus on the user experience and work with the community to enhance that experience through partnerships and relationships. So thank you, Kathleen and Wendy, and we look forward to that presentation right away here.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you for that introduction, Andrew. Wendy and I are thrilled at the opportunity to describe how Coquitlam has been so successful since 2015 in Communities in Bloom by applying the community engagement and placemaking principles to how we work with our community. Our goals have been very focused on making sure that everything we do connects people to their places, makes the park and public green space experiences both meaningful individuals, but to individuals, but connecting our community to itself and generating a sense of ownership over their public spaces. We've been very successful in gaining the kind of community and political support that we have, because everything we do has that underlying goal that then it becomes a measurable outcome. We have some stories to share with you right now. The approach we've taken has been focused on not letting any opportunity go to waste. The first one I'll talk about is we set the world record for the number of people participating in a weed pull in Mundy Park. It's a large natural forested area park. And for us, the significance here was not only that we got over 900 members of the community, schools, businesses, clubs, individuals, and our staff together to pull weeds, but that it was a measure of how valuable people find that space and their eagerness to feel like they can contribute to its long-term viability and health. And the fact that people were not only happy to volunteer, but seemed very emotionally touched at the opportunity was a good reminder that there's already this pent-up interest. We live in a time of social isolation and a lot of change. I should say as well that Coquitlam is a suburban city that's urbanizing quick, that's very diverse, and we have a lot of new Canadians. So providing opportunities for everybody of every demographic to be involved is really critical for us. And having our staff involved in thinking about creative things we can add to the experience. So this is a simple example of putting a slack line up. The most memorable use of it was we had a group of new Canadians in an English language course. There was quite an age group, including some very senior women from Iran, I believe, and they had a blast on the non-traditional. We put up hammocks, give people lots of different things that they can be involved in. We have as a standard kind of activity that we include in almost every activation is pollinator parties or pollinator plantings of one kind or another. Again, it's a good reminder that people actually value having their own fingers on things they already are looking for opportunities to enhance the spaces that they value, to meet their neighbors, to have the experience of, look at that, I did that, I planted that lily, excuse me, and now it's blooming, and I'll see it again next year. Those kinds of sense of ownership and connection is just about invaluable in terms of building community and building civic pride. We've got a part of our pollinator program is a whole array of semi-humorous temporary signage we put up as part of public education as well. Every activation, we get more volunteers who will keep an eye on the either contribute to maintaining things or take care of what we've placed in the park temporarily. We do a lot of activities, including that expand the range of music, art, and of course food at every activity. One of the standards has become we have communities painting, like paint by number big flags that then get left behind in the park for the season. They've become a real kind of brand for us. They're very colorful, they're very large, and surprisingly, again, people feel like they want to just participate. That's something that they had their hands on and contribute to enhancing the park experience for their families and for others. Part of it, I want to say, we go out of our way to ensure our staff are involved in everything we do. And that's generated both incredible returns in terms of staff engagement, but the community relationship is very enhanced. The previous slide featured one of our staff named Bob Fraser, who is deaf. And we found out through this process that his superpower is communicating with people who don't speak English. And so his participation adds, you know, his normal workday is on a mower, and he's an equipment operator, so wouldn't necessarily have much positive contact with the community. That engagement is really powerful, positive. I think we get more kudos about our staff than is typical, and a part of that is our staff are encouraged to focus on the value they're creating for their community. As I said, there's plantings, things like chalk art. We can go through these fairly quickly. We've put up the next one, Wendy, is a blackboard that invites people to describe why they're happy to live in Coquitlam, why they're proud of the community. And it's always really heartening to see the kind of outcome of the work we're doing in that kind of explicit way. And we can share that with our decision makers and others to focus on how well the community is feeling about itself. The pop-up activities we deliver, this is last summer, pop-up youth park. And again, often the demographic that feels unwelcome in our parks and in our community in general are the teenagers and young adults. This is another situation where we had a pop-up volleyball court and a whole range of activity for youth, everything from gardening through to basketball and slacklining, etc. And very successful because it does connect those youth to their place, and that generates a kind of oversight and stewardship that, again, you can't pay for any other way. It's a very positive outcome. One of our most successful pop-up activities has been a beach that we put in Blue Mountain Park for the summer. It was a partnership with Lafarge, who contributed the sand, and their staff came. There's a photo coming up, and the yellow shirts are Lafarge staff who helped us install it and prepare it and then activate it over the first days and weeks. Part of this, again, is a movable furniture. People were worried that the furniture and umbrellas and toys would disappear, but in fact, what we're doing through this activity is subliminally sending a message to people that they're very alert to. What they come away with, seeing things left in the parks for everybody to enjoy, is the realization that this park is so safe and this community is so trusting that if I come back tomorrow, the toys and umbrellas and chairs will still be here. And in fact, that often we end up with more because people share them. So that's our story around pop-up. Wendy will take it from here on the next stories.
Great, thanks, Kathy. So just to continue on, we started to add to our Adopt-A programs, which I think are in most communities, adopt a trail, a street. But we wanted to focus not just on adopting a place, but how you could take that traditional program and connect it to placemaking. So we worked with service clubs, daycares, residents, community gardeners, to create different kinds of libraries or adopt opportunities that would have a meaningful connection for whoever was adopting or the host. So the first traditional one is the Adopt a Library, which you'll see in many communities. And this was a service club that chose the location where they held their meetings so that they could stay connected to it. Once we did the library with the books, that kind of led to our community gardeners having the idea they wanted to do a library, but then they also wanted to add seed sharing. So they ended up creating their own library that is at a community garden that they keep stocked with books for the community and targeting children. And then seed sharing. From that, we had some gardeners who participated in that and then thought, what about sharing toys? Which kind of led to our new equipment libraries that we put out, which those are actually constructed by the city. We put them in and then we work with community groups, sport groups to fill those with toys that people can use. They're situated near park amenities, places where you can play ball, play catch. There's frisbees. Near courts, there'll be spare pickleball courts or pickleball equipment. And the idea, again, is that community can look after them, restock them. And it's an honor system, and we've had very little, in fact, usually what we get is more toys popping up as opposed to them going missing. So from that one, we thought, okay, let's build on that and let's do pollinator hotels. Pollinators is a big theme. So we started creating pollinator hotels. This is a school that designed their own out of pallets. And then we work together to have it installed. They care for it. But we've now started in different parks or public spaces, people being able to add that component. From the pollinator hotels, we had a youth group that wanted to do edible planters. And so they wanted to place them near youth amenities, growing edible fruits, flowers, vegetables, herbs. They maintained it. They looked after it, encouraged tasting, ended up developing mocktail nights and using botanicals to infuse water, sparkling water. But again, creating a space and enhancing the space that normally was kind of just plain and only being used for traditional uses, ended up growing different ideas with that. And that definitely was attributed to our youth. The other edible planter project we have in Coquitlam is our really popular Coquitlam Munch. And our local Business Improvement Association, as well as Coquitlam Bloom members, work together to get local businesses to adopt planters in about a 3-block radius. Those planters are cared for by local business. It's actually been popular enough. They've brought in a master gardener to help them out. And people are encouraged to taste throughout the year and learn a little bit about food security, edibles, and again, very, very popular. The other area that we just wanted to kind of mention in Coquitlam in terms of place is we have a natural heritage. We have the large part of our community is natural forest areas, or in this case, this is a large arboretum. So we have community super connected to those spaces, and it was working with community on how to bring others into that and to see that. So although we didn't create the space, it was created. We have local community host walks in order to share what's there. And we're doing it with our youth as well, we have 2 large forests, very involved in protecting that forest. Nice hug around a tree. Kathy mentioned our staff engagement part. And I think this is what sets us apart is right off the get-go, we wanted our staff, our park staff, our civic staff to be involved and connected with community. So this is an annual parade that occurs. Our staff create the parade entry. They are the ones that are in it at the time. They're the ones that have won the award. Neighboring communities can't believe that our staff and families are coming out and doing this on their own. This was their pollinator float they constructed out of found materials. The other one, if you've seen before, our signature tractor dance, where we have our park equipment operators, operations crew, choreograph an equipment dance. Last year's theme, they did a pollinator theme and to the flight of bumblebee. But it does show that sense of pride and community spirit. We started by only doing it in the judges tour. It proved popular by those people walking by and attending. We've expanded. We do it on a park day for the public. We do 4 performances. Public are encouraged to be able to come and sit on the equipment afterwards, which now when we do any kind of park opening or public space, we just take a piece of equipment, park it there as for a couple hours, and we just let people sit in equipment, which again is a kind of non-traditional use, but gets people talking and connecting with each other. Just going to run through these final ones kind of quickly, but this is our Coquitlam Remembers activity. And so near our cenotaph, we paint poppies with the public on the grass on the 10 days leading up to Remembrance Day. We also tie yellow ribbon around the series of trees at the location. Folks are encouraged to write messages of thanks. Those are then all transcribed at the end after the ceremony and then forwarded on to veterans organizations just to recognize. Was so popular, we ended up adding flag painting, as Kathy had shown earlier, of poppies, adding the area. And that leads us up to our final signature event of the year, which is our Lights at Lafarge, or Winter Light Display. This is a 1.2 kilometer loop of Lafarge Lake in the city's core. You can see from above, it's fully lit, allows people to walk the 1.2K loop in the darkest days, and it is a free event. So it is not gated, it's fully open to the public. So all those lights are created by volunteers and our staff. And this is an example of a English class, ESL class, making our pop bottle tulips for installation. This is a local school group coming down and putting those in. I think right now we probably have over 3,000 tulips that have to be installed every year. So it takes a lot of volunteer help to get all that in, but people love doing it, rain or shine. We also fabricate components of the display out of just found materials or rebar, and then the lights are strung on there. And again, this is a group of volunteers doing that. Just wanted to show you a close-up of the walk. This walkway is one of the sides of the lake, and all those arches were constructed and the lights strung by volunteers and staff. It's very busy. And in COVID times, this year we're struggling with how are we going to do this, but maintain that kind of physical distancing. So we've got some ideas planned because we don't want to lose this opportunity for people to be outside and enjoying the walk and each other. This is a view from our fishing pier that gets transformed into a beautiful date night location. And the chandelier you see hanging above was actually crafted from recycled, upcycled aluminum by our welder. Last year we had a lot of groups around the loop, just coming together and singing for people who are walking. Again, another manufactured piece. I don't know if you can see the 2 children at the base, but the display allows people to be in the display and again, connect with it. And again, this was created by staff and volunteers. And if you recognize our mosaic culture, Chief of the Undersea World, we light that in the winter months. So it's an eco sculpture in the growing season. And then afterwards, we light it and we still get the benefit of that beautiful piece. So just in wrapping up, for us, placemaking is around that civic pride and spirit, creative engagement with our community and our staff, and creating those places and experiences. And I'm just going to let Kathy just wrap up while I try and get a video up here for us to play at the very end, just a short video, just to experience Coquitlam.
Thanks, Wendy. I had mentioned that we are looking for outcomes from this kind of work. And the data that I take immense pride in is that when we talk about making people feel like they're connected and own their public spaces, the outcome is a measurable reduction in the amount of graffiti, litter, and vandalism. And when we were recently challenged, I was actually quite shocked at the almost non-existent issues we have in those categories. Probably litter in COVID has been more of a problem, but we have virtually no graffiti. So where we were spending significant amounts of money removing graffiti 10 or 15 years ago, we have almost none of it happening. So we've really got tangible outcomes, and that is part of that translates into huge communities and political support. So money doesn't become an object to our work. So here's the end of our presentation with our video.
Great, so I'll hand that back over to Andrew.
Okay, well, thank you, Wendy and Kathleen, for your great presentation. I think it was a great video. It really showed us what's going on in Coquitlam anyways, and it was pretty cool to see that. So we don't have a ton of questions coming in on the chat box yet, or the Q&A. So again, if you do have any questions, feel free to hover on the lower side of your screen and to bring that option up. But I do thank you, all of you, for your presentations today. I know as the Communities in Bloom coordinator for Saskatchewan here, I work with so many different communities, and what I find really cool about placemaking is that really I find placemaking to be the theory, the ideas, the practice, and Communities in Bloom to be one of those mechanisms to really complete that effort. And what's amazing is how it can be accomplished on any scale in any size of community. You know, I work with communities that have less than 100 people in them, and then there's also communities across Canada involved with the program that have millions of people in them. So it's just amazing how we can all make our communities better places to be. So I do have one question coming in here. It's for Gwen, and the question is, after so many years of contributing to your community through Communities in Bloom, what would you recommend to new people who want to get involved?
Boy, that's a great question. I think the very easiest thing to do to be involved is just to become part of something, part of a group that cleans up, part of a group that helps to do planting in the spring. I just think Communities in Bloom encompasses so many different parts of the big picture of your community that really you can flow to any one of those criteria: historical, urban, forest, anything that kind of floats your boat. There's something that in your community that will get you started, and there's always somebody like-minded for you to get going with. And over all the years that we've been Communities in Bloom, Communities in Bloom community, it just grows. It's a little like, I always think of, I'm a retired grade 1-2 teacher. I always think of the story of Stone Soup. You know, somebody starts and somebody hooks on to that, and it just grows within itself. So as a community, as a person who wants to get involved with Communities in Bloom, there's just all kinds of ways to do that. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm a great believer in the program, to be sure.
Thank you, Gwen. Now I have another question here in our chat box. We got two coming up here actually first, but I'll go to the chat box first. For Coquitlam, could you describe the process you use, how you coordinate that flag painting activity a little bit more?
So what we do is we usually work with a local artist to do the design, and they go ahead and do the outline, and they do one that's colored, so we know what palette to use. They do then the stencil version. Then we work with a silk screener to do those. We can print them on any size. They just scale for those are 20-foot flags. We're also doing a 4-foot fence panel this year that goes on a chain link fence in 4-foot sections. Obviously for COVID, it's easier for us to paint individually, so we've shrunk the size of the panel, but we use them on fences, tennis courts, flags freestanding that go in the ground. The silk screener provides us the paints, and then with the color template, and then pretty much, as Kathy said, our staff and volunteers follow the paint by numbers and turn out a beautiful product, which we use in all of our parks.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. I've got one more question here, also for Wendy. How do you inspire your staff to stay engaged? It seems like you have a very well engaged and positive staff in your system.
Absolutely, and I think we tell the story when we got started in 2015 at a staff meeting. We had a challenge with our equipment operators. I asked if anyone wanted to do something for the judges tour that might be different and creative. And my background is in recreation. I was a synchronized swimming coach years ago. And so I mentioned, you know, would anyone want to do a synchronized choreographed thing, something? And my quietest equipment operator at the time, Matt, put up his hand and said, oh, I'll try. And so just help support him with some music support and things. And he ended up taking that, and he's really the creator of that tractor dance. So that came out of somebody right out of the blue. I have no idea what, other than being there for him. And once we had that success that people were just amazed by, had great time at, it was, fantastic, unexpected, but involved everyone. That success breeds success. I really believe in it. And so every time someone came up with an idea, we tried to find some way to take that idea and make that happen for them. We also try really hard to reach out and bring in others. So I think that if you have a team around you and a support, it can make those things happen. And as Kathy had said, we connect our staff to community who love doing these things, help that support, whether that's a business group. And so sort of having that expectation that we want to add something different to their day, I think has been just opened up that creativity. And we've had lots of great examples of that, lots of great ideas out of the group.
If I can just add, one of the funniest things that ever has happened to us, our park staff does the installation of the lights, and it usually takes us a couple weeks, and everybody's out in the middle of usually pouring rain, and they get more thanks from the community for that activity. It's such a positive interaction. They get to be creative because they're pulling things out of the trash and making sunflowers out of bicycle wheels and whatever they come up with. And the community, the park is open, so people are walking around all day while this installation is going on and are so thankful, grateful, and encouraging. It's one of the most positive things. So every time we do something that improves a site with the community or beside them, the kudos that comes up is a great reminder for our staff and for our politicians around the value we can deliver to the community, over and above mowing the grass and pulling the weeds. So it's a very, it builds on itself. So every time we do more, it creates more staff engagement.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that answer. I believe that's all the questions that we have at this moment. So thank you everybody for being part of today's webinar. Oh, I saw maybe one more popped up. Okay, no, we're good to go. And again, thank you for joining everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to our 4 speakers. And we hope that we'll be able to see you come into more of our webinars that are being hosted next Wednesday and Thursday over the next 2 weeks. And then, of course, we also have our final town hall session on Friday, October 9th. So we've also got more webinars coming up tomorrow. At 1 p.m. Eastern is when everything starts up. And we'll have What Drives Community Success. I'll just put a little plug that Gwen happens to be speaking in that session as well. And then at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have Youth Involvement, Interest in Sustainable Communities. So again, we hope to see you there, and thank you for joining us today.